In a bustling city where skyscrapers touched the clouds and passersby hurried by, oblivious to the shadows of life, a young homeless girl found something unusual, a millionaire's bank card. But what she asked for in return broke the millionaire's heart and made him cry. But before we continue, leave a comment on where you're watching this video from and check if you're subscribed to the channel, because tomorrow I have another interesting story for you. Enjoy listening. On the streets of the city she called home, on the cold sidewalk that had become her bed, lived Molly, a 10-year-old girl. She had long grown accustomed to the cold stares of passers-by, the whispers of pity, and the empty promises of help. Her face, though covered in a layer of street grime, shone with childlike innocence. Molly had become an orphan early on, forgotten by this cruel world. Every day she sat on the corner of the busiest street in the city, clutching a tin cup and hoping for spare change from the rare, kind-hearted passersby. But Molly was smart. She knew how to become invisible, how to glide through the city, staying in the shadows. She didn't steal or pickpocket. Her life depended on the rare acts of kindness from the few who dared to stop. Life was hard, but it was the only world she knew. One cold evening, as the wind howled and the city lights flickered in the twilight, something strange happened. Among the crowd, Molly noticed a man in an expensive suit hurrying by. His phone was pressed to his ear, his steps were quick. He was clearly a wealthy man. His polished shoes gleamed and his watch sparkled in the streetlights. In his haste, he dropped something from his pocket. Molly saw a black credit card glinting. She picked it up, remaining unnoticed as always. The card had a name on it: Carter Vaughn. The name meant nothing to her, but the appearance of the card indicated it belonged to someone important and wealthy. Her first impulse was to return the find, but clutching the card in her hands, she hesitated. What if this was her chance to change her life? She had heard stories of lost cards becoming a lifeline for people like her. She could buy food, clothes, find a way off the streets. But Molly hesitated. She wasn't a thief, yet hunger and despair, her constant companions, clouded her thoughts. That night, Molly didn't return the card. She decided to keep it. She told herself she would return it, but first she needed to see what it could do. Carter Vaughn was a self-made millionaire. Born into a modest family, he had climbed from the bottom to the top of the corporate world, building an empire of wealth and success. But with each milestone, something in him changed. Softness gave way to hardness, humanity to ambition, and greed and the pursuit of power became his new essence. Carter had everything: luxury cars, a mansion, a private jet. But inside, he felt empty. His marriage had fallen apart years ago, and his only daughter had grown distant, resenting him for always putting his career first. To Carter, money was the solution to all problems. If someone was unhappy, it meant they simply didn't have enough money. But deep down, he knew this was a lie, though he stubbornly hid this truth under layers of work and material possessions. The next morning, Molly stood outside a large supermarket. Her stomach growled loudly as she looked at the displays full of food. The credit card could give her everything she dreamed of, but would it work for someone like her? She felt the weight of the card in her pocket and, gathering her courage, walked inside. Filling a cart with food, warm clothes, and a pair of shoes that fit her small, calloused feet perfectly, she headed to the checkout. Her heart pounded as she handed the card to the cashier. Without even glancing at it, the cashier swiped the card, and the screen lit up with the word "Approved." Molly felt a mix of surprise and disbelief. It worked. It really worked. But instead of joy, she felt a strange sense of guilt. She didn't want to live by stealing from others, even if it was a rich man who probably wouldn't notice the loss. Taking her things, Molly made a decision. She would find Carter and return the card. She took what she needed to survive for the next few days, and that would be enough. Finding Carter wasn't difficult. His name appeared in the news and on business websites. Using her street smarts, Molly quickly found out where his office was, located in the heart of the financial district. The marble and glass buildings looked intimidating. Molly, in her tattered clothes, walked through the gleaming doors, feeling out of place as people around her stared in surprise and disbelief. The receptionist eyed her suspiciously, but as soon as Molly mentioned Carter's lost credit card, the woman's eyes widened. Soon enough, Molly found herself in his office. He was on the phone, not paying her any attention. His large, luxurious office emphasized his status. When he finally glanced at Molly, his eyes narrowed in confusion. "What is this? Who are you?" he asked in a cold, sharp tone. Molly stepped forward, holding out the card. "I think this belongs to you," she said. Carter glanced at the card, then back at the girl. "You found it?" His voice softened, but there was still a steely edge to it. Molly nodded and explained how she had picked up the card and used it to buy food and clothes. "I'm sorry for using it," she said quietly. "I didn't want to steal," Molly said softly. "I just needed something to eat." For a moment, Carter was silent, studying the small girl before him. Her words touched something deep inside him. She had returned the card, even though she could have spent all the money and disappeared forever into the city's echoing streets. But instead, she stood here, apologizing for taking a tiny fraction of his wealth. Molly looked up and whispered, "I don't need money or clothes. I don't want anything that can be bought with this card. I want something else." Carter frowned. "What do you want?" Molly hesitated. She looked at the floor, her voice trembling. I want a family." Carter froze. Of all the things he expected to hear, this was not one of them. A family? The words echoed in his mind, stirring a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. This request shook him to his core. He was ready to offer her money, a place to live, even to pay for her education. But a family? That was something that couldn't be bought, something he himself had failed to keep. He tried to explain to her that he wasn't suited for this. He said he didn't know how to be part of a family, that he had lost that part of himself long ago. But Molly, with her wide, hopeful eyes, asked, "Can't you try?" Her question hung in the air like a challenge. Carter struggled with himself. His entire life had been built around money, success, and the belief that wealth could solve any problem. But here stood a girl who didn't care about his wealth. She didn't need a world of things. She needed what he had lost long ago: connection, a sense of belonging. Torn between his usual desire to push people away and a growing desire to help, Carter agreed, or Motzi. He offered Molly a place to stay for a while. He told himself it was temporary, that he was just giving her a chance until something better came along. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just about helping a random child. Days passed, and Molly began to change his life. She showed genuine interest in everything around her: his work, his home, the city outside the windows. She asked him questions no one had ever asked before, making him reflect on his past, his mistakes, and his loneliness. But their fragile world was soon disrupted. Carter's estranged daughter, Lisa, found out about Molly. She had never forgiven her father for sacrificing their family for his career. Now, learning that he had taken in a stranger, she was filled with anger and pain. Lisa confronted Carter, accusing him. You, you think you can replace me with this girl?" Her voice trembled with emotion. "How many times did you leave me alone, choosing work over family, and now you want to be a father to someone else?" Her words were like blows to long-hidden wounds. Carter realized that every decision carried the shadow of his past, and he would have to face it head-on. The argument between father and daughter was intense, filled with years of unspoken resentment and pain. Carter, who prided himself on his ability to control everything, found himself helpless in the face of Lisa's fury. He didn't know how to fix his relationship with her, and now he feared he was failing Molly too. The tension between Carter, Lisa, and Molly reached a breaking point when Molly, overhearing another heated argument, decided to leave. She didn't want to be the cause of more suffering in Carter's life and thought he might be better off without her. For several days, Carter searched for Molly, his heart filled with regret. He realized how much he had grown attached to her, and her absence left a huge void in his life. He reflected on all the mistakes he had made, not just with Molly, but with Lisa too, and how he had pushed people away for the sake of his career. During this time, Carter had an epiphany. He understood that money couldn't fill the emptiness inside him, and that all the wealth in the world couldn't replace the love and connection with loved ones. He had been chasing material success for so long that he had forgotten what truly mattered. Carter found Molly in the same place where he had first met her, on the street, sitting alone with her tin cup in hand. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes, but before she could say anything, Carter knelt down and hugged her tightly. "Molly, I'm so sorry," he whispered, "for everything." Molly, crying into his chest, forgave him. She didn't need explanations or promises of wealth. All she ever wanted was for someone to care for her, to have someone she could call family. In the days that followed, Carter began to rebuild his relationship with Lisa. It wasn't easy, and they had many painful conversations. But gradually they started to mend the broken bridges. Lisa, seeing the changes in her father, began to let go of her resentment. She even found common ground with Molly, and an unexpected but strong bond formed between them. Carter's life, once centered around money and power, now focused on much more important things: love, family, and the relationships that give life meaning. He realized that true wealth is measured not by money, but by the people you love and the connections you cherish. Molly, once a little beggar girl with nothing, found what she had always dreamed of: a family. In return, she gave Carter something he had always lacked: a reason to live for something greater than success. The story ends not with wealth or grand gestures, but with something far more valuable: the simple joy of sitting at a dinner table, sharing a meal, laughing, and knowing that for the first time in a long time, none of them were alone.